Okay, I'm just going to begin. So, welcome if you've joined online during the meditation, short meditation. Welcome to the London Buddhist Centre, Dharma Night. And we're looking at these verses over the next couple of months, really. We're looking at these verses. We're going to look at each verse in more depth. This week I'm going to give an overview. So the verses are called 8 verses to train the mind. 8 verses to train the mind. So they're from what's called the Lojong tradition, which Lojong means mind training. Mind is Lo in Tibetan. So these are Tibetan condensations of a lot of practice into pithy verses, which I will read out very shortly. So it's kind of, there's a sort of strand of Buddhism that's really about slogans or like short little bits of Dharma that you can bring to mind very, very quickly and apply in immediate situations. So, and it's quite good to have some of that Dharma if if you're serious about your practice, to have some things in mind, remembered. That you can just draw upon, whatever, if you can't make it to the Buddhist Centre or you're not online, but you want to practice, or you want to, respond dharmically to a situation, it's good to have some verses that you can draw upon. So this is kind of one of the most pithy kind of structures, I suppose. And these particular ones come from a Tibetan chap called Geshe Langri Thangpa, and he was a disciple of a very, very famous Tibetan teacher called Atisha. And there's probably lots I can say about the lineage, but I'm just going to move to the text, other than to say they're about 1,000, bit over 1,000 years old, these verses. So Langri Thangpa was alive around 900-1000 AD. So I've been reading these and finding them quite challenging myself. It's like they're quite pokey, and I've also they're so challenging that I've sort of been taking them a bit personally. Like they're very the vision behind them is quite exalted, and the uncompromisingness of these verses is pokey. So I'll read the verses so we have an idea of what we're talking about, and then go into a bit more. So, may I cherish all beings with a resolve to accomplish for them the highest good that is more precious than any wish-fulfilling jewel. Whenever I'm in the company of others, may I regard myself as inferior to all, and from the depths of my heart cherish others as supreme. In all my actions, may I watch my mind, and as soon as disturbing emotions arise, may I forcefully stop them at once, since they hurt both me and others. When I see ill-natured people overwhelmed by strong deeds and pain, may I cherish them as something rare, as though I had found a treasure trove. When someone out of envy does me wrong, by insulting me and the like, may I accept defeat and offer victory to them. Even if someone whom I have helped, and in whom I have placed great hopes, does me wrong by harming me, may I see them as an excellent spiritual friend. In brief, directly or indirectly, may I give all help and joy to my mothers, and may I take all their harm and pain secretly upon myself. May none of this ever be sullied by thoughts of the 8 worldly concerns. May I see all things as illusions, and without attachment gain freedom. Sorry, I read that completely wrong. And without attachment gain freedom from bondage. Okay, so there's lots of references to particular Tibetan outlooks that we'll be able to go into over the weeks. Yes, and very strong challenge, setting down a high ideal the practitioner who takes these verses on. Things like, even if someone who I'm helped and in whom I've placed my hopes does me great wrong by harming me, may I see them as an excellent spiritual friend. Yes, so strong stuff sounds great, and probably a lot of it, when we sort of want to apply it in the situation, it's much, much harder, because the content of this is quite emotional. So I'll just say something about the structure of these verses. So the first two verses are really bringing to our attention the fact that this practice is about self and other. So this is the basis that we're going to explore these verses from, is that we're bringing our own self viewpoint in relation to other people. So often we have an idea of Buddhists like up the mountain, meditating in sweet solitude, and all sorts of marvelous mental states. So that's so that's one idea of Buddhists. But actually, and that can happen. But actually, where the test of our practice is in relation to other people. So to take our practice seriously, we need to actually have in our lives, we need to have periods of both. Often, I try to go on a solitary retreat every year. Don't always manage to spend time on my own, but very much my Buddhist life is in relation to others, living with other Buddhists here at the London Buddhist Centre, practicing in my communication, responding to other people, and it's in relation to people that we get most provoked, as well as we get a lot of joy from people. So the first two verses: may I always cherish all beings with the resolve to accomplish them, the highest good that is more precious than any wish-fulfilling jewel. And when I'm in the company of others, may I regard myself as inferior to all, and from the depths of my heart cherish others as supreme. So we'll go into what that relationship between why would we start trying to think of ourselves as inferior to all. We'll spend a whole week on that, but just to give the overview that the field of practice is in the company of others. When I'm in the company of others, this is when I practice. May I cherish all beings. It's, the fundamental sort of dichotomy of self and other is put in the centre. Then the following three verses. So is that right? The following. So the next verse 3, this is the one: in all actions may I watch my mind, and as soon as disturbing emotions arise, may I forcefully stop them at once, since they hurt both me and others. So this one is about mindfulness. It's about applying mindfulness very rigorously, this attentiveness, this quality of mindfulness that we were just practicing in that very short meditation. So being able to even sort of having the emotional strength to be able to watch the mind to this degree. So that's bringing in that aspect, the rigour, and the sort of idea of taming our minds, which we don't always like that idea. We want our minds to be wild, but taming the mind, that we can work with disturbing emotions. So, the next 3 or 4 verses are really about very specific situations. So one is when I see ill-natured people. The next verse is when someone out of envy does me wrong. And then even if someone who I've helped, who I've placed great hopes, does me wrong. So these are 3 specific, really specific, provocative situations. So it's going from quite general, may I cherish all beings, and it's, in my mind, it's like a bit like the verses are sort of unfolding to me what that actually means. So I might go, oh yeah, let's cherish all beings, and it might just feel like great. And then the verses are saying, well, that, yeah, if you agree with that, then this is what you have to do. You have to be rigorous with your mindfulness. And cherishing all beings means people that you don't like, I'm sorry to say. It means people who are not just that you've got a sort of distaste for, but people who are actually going to hurt you. These are the situations that we bring these verses to mind. So challenging. Then the seventh verse, it refers particularly to a particular set of meditations. So in brief, directly or indirectly, may I give help and joy to all my mothers. And what that means is, you've probably heard this, Tibetans practice or belief that all the connectivity of us all through rebirth is that every single person who we meet has at some point in some distant lifetime or close lifetime has been our mother. So just bringing about this attitude sort of builds an intimacy. Never mind what our relationship with our mothers, never mind the sort of complexity of that. The idea is that we have this intimacy with all living beings. Yeah, it's a very Tibetan idea. And that verse refers particularly to a particular set of meditations where you're absorbing other people's pain and suffering and giving your own positivity to them, which that will also be explored over the weeks. So self and other, mindfulness, provocative situations, meditation, and then the final verse, the ending words are, may I see all things as illusions and without attachment, gain and freedom from bondage. So really then just opening out into wisdom, so the highest understanding of Buddhism. Yeah, so that's the kind of trajectory of the verses. Now, I've been drawing on material from an order member called Subhuti. He's the president of the London Buddhist Centre, and he's done quite a few talks and a lot of study on this. So I've been drawing on his material, and he's got a really good way of accessing these. And he's saying there's 3 lines of approach in these verses. So don't worry, and some of those of you at home can see the verses, but don't worry if you can't read the verses, because we'll get to know them. But the 3 approaches or 3 lines of approach in the verses are view, practice, and action. And he's saying the main content of these verses is to do with action, but the framework is the views and the practice. So I'll just talk a little bit about those, like why would we have a view, and what is the view behind these verses? Well, the view is shunyata. So that is a word, a very Buddhist word. Very unhelpfully, we can translate it as emptiness, but shunyata is the wisdom of a Buddha. Basically, it's the understanding that everything that we believe to be fixed, separate, permanent, etc., is actually devoid of any inherent existence. It's very, very counterintuitive to how we perceive the world. So the realization of shunyata renders notions of me and mine laughable. The realization of shunyata is the realization that reality is a never-ending flow of dependently arising conditions. So the traditional way to reflect on shunyata is to reflect on conditionality, to reflect on the interdependence of all phenomena. so that reflection on conditionality is tantamount to reflection on shunyata. And just to say, so shunyata is often translated as emptiness. Sangharakshita often, he says it could also just as well be fullness, which I think is probably more attractive actually. So shunyata can be rendered fullness. There's lots of different ways to describe shunyata. So we're not to mistake it with a kind of vacuum. It's not nihilism. It's not nothingness, but a fullness that can't be expressed in language. It's probably why it's sort of not, I can't tell you what shunyata is and we'll all dwell in it. It can't be expressed in language. It's actually beyond the terms of language. That's why it's not, language and shunyata aren't relatable. And it's beyond the realm that even thought can operate in. So we can't think of shunyata, this great, profound, mysterious emptiness. So that's the view, and that's really what's referred to in the final verse of the realization of shunyata, is seeing all things as illusions. That would be the outcome. That would be the outcome of that understanding. So, like I said, there's quite high ideals, these verses, and we might not think, we might be interested in looking at these verses and think, but I haven't yet realised the great inherent emptiness in all things. If you're, we don't need to have that wisdom in order to start to practice. And for us, it might just be that there is some inkling that self-clinging is not the final, is not going to resolve our complications. It might be that some little notion, some experience in the metta bhavana, some experience of practicing generosity, that our intuition that self-clinging is a kind of closed loop. It doesn't help us. So that's sort of interesting to think, like, what's our deepest experience, what's our sort of most big-hearted experience, and we won't always live our lives according to those deep experiences, but it's really helpful to sort of remember them and keep them in mind. So the view behind those verses is shunyata. And then Subhuti says there's practice. And the practice, he's talking about meditation practice, and the practice that accompanies this view is the bodhicitta, which is a meditation practice whereby, perhaps it's best to think of it as an extension of the metta bhavana. So, has anyone here not done the metta bhavana practice? So the bodhicitta practice is an extension of the metta bhavana. It's really putting cherishing other beings at the heart of Buddhist wisdom, actually, and so the practice of the bodhicitta is related very much to these verses, and that's referred to in the first verse as well. So this wish-fulfilling jewel that's referred to in the first verse, the resolve to accomplish for them the highest good that is more precious than any wish-fulfilling jewel. So this resolve, the bodhicitta, is fueled by compassion. And what the bodhicitta practice has that we don't bring into the metta bhavana is this practice of secretly taking on the harm and pain and suffering of other beings, and giving them all our merit. So like a deep act of selflessness, a deep putting self before other, which is for me certainly counterintuitive. So this practice is powered by compassion. That's the kind of fuel behind it. And it's the response of wisdom in relation to other people. So compassion and wisdom being absolutely intermingled. Yeah, the relation to shunyata is the recognition that emptiness is simultaneous with the recognition of interconnectedness. If you have a realization of emptiness that isn't fueled with love, isn't in connection with other beings, isn't in relation to others, then it's not an actual realization. It's maybe a cognitive understanding or something. Like it will arise at the same time. That sort of lightness of self-clinging. And that's the title of this talk was something about a new mind, and that's what the bodhicitta is trying to cultivate, is a sense of a new mind. And I was really interested in this word, the new mind. Maybe I'll say a little bit more about that. So a new mind, not just like a mind that's a little bit better, which I think is what I generally sort of hope for, a mind that's pretty much me. I'm not that willing to, this feeling, I'm not really willing to sacrifice me, but I want my mind to be better. So a new mind in this case is not just that. It doesn't sort of contain itself with that. The new mind is a mind that's radically, the whole mode of its operating is transformed. And I think that's quite interesting as well to reflect on, like when are the times that I want a new mind? And I find I want a new mind when I'm being particularly me-ish, like when I'm a bit like caught in my habits and frustrated. And the way that we might express that is not by changing our minds, but changing our environment. It's like, I'm fed up with myself. I'll do something external to move myself along. Put myself in a different place that's nicer. Consume some nicer things. Buy some nicer stuff. Change the company that I keep. Get someone else to come and cheer me up. So these are things that we do. I'm not really sort of saying that those are wrong things to do. And I sort of believe that anything that we do to try and sort of improve our experience is, whether it's however misguided, is an expression of this desire actually to escape self-clinging. But we just don't realise that it won't happen without that deeper change. Do you know what I mean? Like so anything that we do to kind of like if we just want to go out and just get really, really drunk, it's because we're fed up with the minds that we've got. We want to change in experience, and materialism is the same. Like the buying of new things, the getting of new possessions, a bigger, better house, etc. It's just a misunderstanding about what's actually going to improve our experience. I want a new mind when I feel completely hemmed in by my own self. And Subhuti talks about the hell of self that you experience if you go on a long solitary retreat, or spend, maybe not long, but a solitary retreat. I think, how long was Subhuti? 9 months or something. He went on quite a long solitary retreat anyway, and that's when he started talking about like realizing the hell of self, and not even a particularly hellish version of self. It's not like talking about being in anguished mental states, but just the restriction of being self-orientated. It is much more obvious when you can't change things, when you can't follow up on any particular impulse or other. But as I also noticed that the time that I'm least likely want to act on having a new mind is probably when I'm also in some kind of reaction, like being particularly me-ish. It's like at the same time I can't bear my experience, and I'm really, really not willing to let go and do something creative. So I don't know if you know that feeling of like feeling reactive, and I don't know, or like maybe if you're in a bit of an argument with someone and it's really, really unpleasant, but like just having to maintain being right and not responding that creative, like new way of doing things. So for me, like they both come at the same time very often, like really wishing that something else was happening, and really in response to that just really, really holding on. There's a nice little story about how we can't really we prefer familiarity how to anything new. I think it's an Indian story. It's about a woman whose husband was a fisherman, and so he caught the fish. Her job was to sell it at the market, and the market was quite far from her home. So one day she took the fish to the market, and it took much longer than usual to sell the fish. And by the time she'd sold all the fish, it was really dark, and it would have been dangerous for her to walk home. So the person near her, the flower seller, said, "Why don't you stay at my place?" So the fisherman's wife followed the flower seller to her place and tried to sleep, was lying there in this house, and the house was fragrant with flowers. The flower sellers, the house smelled of like all these different flowers, perfumed with jasmine, etc. And the fisherman's wife couldn't, like it was so strong, she couldn't sleep. She was lying awake, like it's so out of her normal realm. Then she realised she had her basket where she carried all the fish in, and she put that over her head. It smelled familiar, it was fishy, it was disgusting, but it was her, it was where she was happy. So then she went straight to sleep. And so that story is kind of used as an analogy of how we prefer our silly old habits to something. We find it uncomfortable to go into something new, and even we can even find beauty actually uncomfortable if it's not familiar. Yeah, so the practice is developing a new mind. The view is one of shunyata, so everything being connected. Really. These are big Buddhist ideas. And then actually most of these verses are about action. So that's where we go from, that's where we start looking at our mind. Like, what do we do in this situation? What do we do? And the actions are, like I was saying, placing us directly in relation to other people. They're concrete situations. They're direct instructions what to do when this happens, and it's even using those difficult situations as reminders to practice, which I think is a really interesting way of thinking about it. Like, rather than like, I guess what I often think is that the conditions are too difficult to practice, that I'm not quite there yet. But these are using those difficult, like when someone does this, that then brings to mind the verse that you've got in your memory, and you sort of spontaneously start applying it. Yeah, so concrete situations applied like on the ground in life, and highlighting the kind of opportunities for practice that we might really resist or skim over or sort of ignore. And the basis of these practices is that a fundamental starting point is that we cherish ourselves more than we cherish other people. And Buddhism doesn't say that is morally wrong. That's like, that we should feel guilty about that, or ashamed. This is just the basic starting point of every life, that we cherish ourselves more than we cherish other people, and even the experience is that we're running our own lives from our point of view at the centre of our own universe. And so, this is also one of the big ideas of Buddhism, that this could be different. Like if no one had told me this, I wouldn't have thought of it, that I could expand out of a self-centered viewpoint. Like, it's totally, there's nothing that I notice in my experience. Now that I've been trained to notice it, I can sort of look out for it, but there's nothing that in my my sort of natural mindset that would have led me to discover that and these attachments to ourselves, called kleshas, which are sort of knots, I suppose. There's this really nice little verse. One of the lines is, "Why tie knots in the sky?" So these kleshas they're not real knots. They're self-created knots. They don't actually exist. They're to do with maybe I'll tell you more. Maybe I'll say what the kleshas are. They're deeper than anything visible. They're inborn, and they're about attachment to ourselves. They're about how we view ourselves in relation to others. So a kind of pride. So how we automatically sort of see ourselves equal to other people, or above other people, or below other people. The view of a fixed and separate self, that's one of the kleshas. And they're just the basic misunderstanding about the nature of experience. So these kleshas are nothing to do with how our parents brought us up, what kind of upbringing they had. There's nothing to do with our psychology. It's just where we start from. And we can't do away with it. We can't go, oh, I don't want to be self-cherishing anymore, self-clinging. And these verses aren't actually, although it seems they are, they're not actually saying that. What they're saying is, this is the starting point. We cherish ourselves, and then we start to cherish others as we cherish ourselves. So there's this sense that rather than doing away with self-clinging, we can just take more and more people into account and expand the centre of the universe. And that expansion can keep going. So really, just a warning, that these aren't about self-hatred. And some of these verses, because of the sort of provocative way they're written, seeing myself as inferior to others, etc., they're not... we can quite easily sort of get in a muddle about that, because we've got complex psychologies. So they're not about self-hatred. And Subhuti actually says that even self-hatred is a kind of self-cherishing. It's a self-centeredness. It's an attention. It's an attention to ourselves. Yeah. Maybe I'll just pause and just see if there are any questions from what I've said. Give my voice a break. Or comments, or... Yeah.
I was going to ask a question about exactly that inferior bit that you just talked about. Like how to balance that cherishing others but not putting ourselves in a very kind of degrading or self-judgmental place, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So so that verse, let me just read that verse, is, when I'm in the company of others, may I regard myself as inferior to all, and from the depths of my heart cherishes other supreme. I think, it's extremely challenging, isn't it? I think without the view of without the view and the practice of the bodhicitta, so without a whole other range of other things, that verse on its own would just be quite destructive. It could just be, we just start becoming sort of cringy, seeing oneself as a low kind of person thing. So in order to practice this, we do have to have quite positive self-regard. It's not saying we don't have a positive, healthy sense of self. And in a way, I think also over the next couple of weeks we'll be able to go into that quite a lot more, because it is really, really challenging. I think the way to think about it just now is just that we're setting up the field of practice of rather than thinking about whether I'm going to be inferior or not, just thinking about how do we respond to other people. So setting up the field of practice as self and other, and I think it's quite interesting just to observe that for a while without trying to actually do anything about it. Just okay, how am I in relation? Just watch the mind at work, because I think if we do anything about it too soon, we can often sort of misunderstand what I'm trying to say is that these are so deep we won't be able to sort of dig them out at once, but we can work at them. Yeah. And I did think of something else. When I was saying that, I thought of something else to say. Maybe it will come back to me. I think, as I was reflecting on this, maybe in particular that verse is about, it made me think of times that I really had to be right, because I knew I was right. So I think that's quite a good area to watch our minds. Like, I'm right, you're wrong. And what does that actually mean? Why do I actually need to be right in this situation? Particularly when it's not got much of a consequence. And I was thinking, actually, I think there have been times when other people have sort of out of good manners just let me win a point, and how wonderful it is being around people who are big enough to just go, oh yeah, yeah, maybe you're right. I am. So I think maybe that would be my suggestion for the practice. One of the practices is just noticing that tendency to be right, and what does that need to be right, and what does that feel like. For me, it's definitely quite heavy or dense feeling of holding on. Yeah, so I've sort of not properly answered your question, but maybe something in the area of...
It was helpful, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Any more questions or more thoughts? Okay. Yeah. Bhante Sangharakshita's got a really nice set of 5 points to get enlightened. So if 8's too many, let's go down to 5 and then see what we can make of that. And they relate to this. The final 3 points relate to this quite well. So his points are: try to be mindful and positive. So practice mindfulness, practice the metta bhavana. The second, so becoming an emotionally and positive and integrated person. The third point is, don't lose sight of the ultimate goal, and have that as a conscious daily reflection. So in relation to that, to these verses, don't lose sight of wisdom and compassion. Don't lose sight of shunyata, this realization of shunyata. However far away it may be from where we're at. Don't lose sight of that. Try to apply at every situation what your the deepest experience that you've had. So I think that's a really nice one. I touched on it earlier. Remembering when your heart has felt its most expansive, when you've been in touch with something that you're not usually in touch with, for however short a period of time, that moment of really, really strong inspiration. They don't last, they're fleeting, at least to start with in the spiritual life. But you can still use it to apply that to any situation that you can. And I definitely have that feeling of experiencing, knowing that I can. It could be so easy if I dropped certain things, and in those moments it is really easy, and then my old habits come back in, and get in the way of everything. But I also know that I can refer to those really precious sort of golden moments and keep using them. And I really like the wording of that, because he's saying your deepest experience. So you're kind of fueling yourself from your own life, and that relates to the practice of the bodhicitta. And then do your best to help people. So that's the final point of 5 points to get enlightened. Do your best to help people whenever you can, and that's the action. So really, that's what these verses are about. Is like keeping in mind that what other people's best interest is also enlightenment, is also being in a state of metta, is also having a deeper sense of mindfulness, and bringing that wherever you can to whatever situation. So do your best to help people. And this orientation is so important, because one of the things that can happen in the spiritual life is it becomes like super self-help. Even at quite high levels, people with strong meditation practices can still get sort of sidetracked into their own experiences. So we have to keep expanding it out in relation to other people. Yeah. So that's really, I think that's all I want to say at the moment, that the field of practice in this is self and other people. The discipline is watching our minds, and the reminders for practice is difficult situations, and those difficult situations are gold. In order to they're where we can really have a strong effect, because so much of us is involved. Yeah, so let's have a break. We'll come back at 8:30. So we're going to have a tea break in a minute. But first of all, really happy Surya Naga's here. Just to say, Surya Naga very recently ordained. He's back from his ordination retreat, and he's now come back on the Dharma Night team. So he's just going to have a few words before we have a break.
Great, thank you, Kusalasara. Thanks for that talk. Really great to be back here at Dharma Night. As Kusalasara was saying, this is the first in our series for Dharma Night, an 8-week series. That's right, isn't it?
Maybe 9.
A 9-week series on the 8 verses, and so. Do just keep coming to Dharma Night. That's the first thing I just want to say at the moment. So this is the very first time for I think 18 months or something like that, or more that you can just turn up to the London Buddhist Centre without having to book and come inside. So that's really exciting. One thing about that you don't need to book is that it would be really easy to just kind of like not bother, think, oh yeah, I'll probably go next Monday, and because you don't need to book, then you can kind of like change your mind at the last minute. So one thing I'd just say is try and just make a commitment, even to just come the same time every week, the same class every week. So yeah, I'd recommend Dharma Night for that one. The other thing is, so that's Dharma Night. On Sunday will be Dharma Day. So Dharma Night comes every week. Dharma Day comes once a year.
Dharma Night and day all the time here.
Every day is a Dharma Day, but Sunday is especially a Dharma Day. So that's a festival that we run once a year to celebrate the first teaching of the Dharma by the Buddha. So there'll be a whole day of programs, of a program of a whole day. Let me just check what's on that. So there'll be meditation in the morning at 10 a.m. here. There'll be a shared lunch at 1 p.m. So that will also be on YouTube, the meditation morning. There'll be a shared lunch. You can't access that through YouTube. There'll be a children's activity, a creative celebration for all ages, it says. Then there'll be a led reflection on the Dharma at 3 p.m. A keynote talk by Dhammadinna, who is, she's one of the kind of most experienced teachers around the London Buddhist Centre. And then at 7 p.m. we'll have the festival day puja with mitra ceremonies, where people will be kind of publicly declaring themselves to be Buddhists. So yeah, really, really full day. That's this Sunday, the 25th of July. And that's, you can come here in person, and some of those events will be on YouTube as well. And then lastly, what I want to just say is about what we're trying to do here at the London Buddhist Centre, and what we're trying to do sort of next in a way. So we're now kind of opened up to in-person classes that you don't have to book. So that's really great. But we've also kind of in the last kind of year and a half learned something about, that actually events can work online as well. What we're doing in the London Buddhist Centre can be shared with the whole world and with people who can't physically make it to the London Buddhist Centre. I was watching a video today on BBC News about somebody, I think she had multiple sclerosis, and she was just saying about how the last year has been great for her because she's been able to access everything online. And we really, really want to make sure that we can continue doing that. We really want to make sure that we can continue offering everything that we do at the London Buddhist Centre online as well as in person. And through doing that, we can kind of reach as many people as possible, reach the whole world. But to do that, we need your support. We need you to kind of get involved in that. And the way to do that, particularly if you're online at the moment, is to donate, is to contribute financially, because putting things online isn't just it takes extra resource from the centre team, and at the moment the London Buddhist Centre has a lot less resource than normal, so we're doing more with less resource. So yeah, really, really great if you can contribute financially to that project, to this huge project, the London Buddhist Centre. So there's a suggestion of donating £10 online. You've got some time now to do that whilst the rest of us go and have tea. Yeah, thanks.